Hi guys, T2 out here. Welcome back to the Titan Apprentice channel. I got David back again with me, and in today's video we're going to do another recap of our adventures together and kind of what we've learned. So let's get started with our main three adventures. That was the first Get Home Bag Challenge, then it's the Get Home Bag Fail that we did, and then the Bug Out Bag 20 miles on the Foothills Trail.
We had planned to set out, I think it was 8 miles for us to hike that road, 4.5 roughly miles out to the main highway, turn around and come back to the campsite and then set up camp and survive the night. We did that. We did that. We made that hike fine. It wasn't that bad. It was relatively flat. It was pavement.
A little bit of gravel.
It went relatively good. The hiking portion did. We made it back to camp, and then that was where GH, my younger brother, met up with us, and we started to set up camp. Fond memory of that camp out was GH making his hobo shack. You know, he had a shower curtain. He went all out with it.
I have the hobo mansion, privacy fence for the ladies, you know.
The weather was nice. It wasn't too bad. I think it did get a little chilly that night, but if I remember right, but it wasn't nothing majorly bad.
Our sleeping situation though
Did suck.
It sucked a little bit.
That was back before we found out the magic of pads.
Yeah. So originally my idea was to sleep on top of some 55-gallon trash bags in a A-frame tarp shelter. I ended up cutting one of the trash bags and using it as a cover over one of my sides. Things that I learned was tent stakes will be your best friend. Sleeping on the ground sucks, but I stayed warm. I think I had an emergency sleeping bag to sleep in, and I still use it even now today.
So I did end up having to move into GH's shelter. GH left. He was having some issues with his back during that deal. He toughed it out as long as he could, came back in the morning, and it was there with us. But I did end up moving into his shelter because of the fact it was better. So when I went and purchased my tarp for that trip, I purchased what I thought was, oh, this will be fine. My plan was to do a L-shaped cover so that I would be able to lay on some of the tarp and then have the rest of the tarp folded over me, creating a shelter. That didn't work. It was cold. Might have started to sprinkle or something early that morning.
Yep.
It just sucked all around. I moved into GH's hobo shack and did fine in there. The big negatives was the pads. I remember us complaining a lot about that. You could feel the transfer of the heat into the ground. You knew you were losing heat throughout the night. But that's where we got the idea of starting to use pads. That was really the only complaints I remember from that trip.
So the second adventure is the Get Home Bag Fail. The original idea was to go to Yellow Branch Falls from my mother's house. About 5 miles each way, a mix between a road march and a trail walk. A lot of different changes of terrain, especially because we weren't walking on the road. We were walking on the side of the road a day after it rained. We did the 10-mile hike, not a problem. We were going to camp at her house. Couldn't find a spot that me nor him could lay down on. So we ended up going to a local campsite called Blackwell's Bridge, which was a very sandy location, and we set up camp there. Obviously that one did not go as planned. We'll talk about the hike portion, and then we'll talk about the actual camp and why it's the Get Home Bag Fail.
I think that whole trip was a fail from the beginning, to be dead honest. That was the most miserable, most god-awful hike I have ever done. He's under exaggerating. I'm gonna go ahead and say that right now. There was a steady flow of traffic on this road. There was no road march portion of this. We walked on the side of the road the entire time. But when he's saying we were sinking, I mean up to my ankle in mud, in just soft soil. I also had an issue going on at that point with water, if you remember. I had brought a whopping 1/16 fluid ounce bottle of water with no resupply in sight until we got to the halfway mark.
I've emptied one bottle. I'm on the second one. So you haven't even touched your...
Not yet. I'm about to though. This whole trip sucked. My thought process was I'll cut down some weight and it'll be easier. No. I mean, I have like Vietnam flashbacks at times thinking about this hike. It sucked. I mean, this straight up just sucked. I hated every minute of this. But it was a learning opportunity. I walked away knowing good and well, hell, I don't care about the water. Wait, I will carry 50 pounds of water if I have to stay hydrated. By the time we got done, I had such bad, crippling cramps in my leg. As soon as we got back to the vehicle, I was like, holy crap, I've messed up. Anytime I bend my knees, anytime I straighten my legs, anytime I make any kind of movement, instant cramp. And I mean a cramp that it takes a hot minute to get rid of.
I had no complaints on my walk. Boots of choice, probably not the best ones, but not nearly as bad as logger boots. So we get done hiking and we load up in the car, then we went and find a camping spot. So my shelter of choice was a UST survival blanket and a emergency sleeping bag. I laid directly on the ground. Other than sand, there was nothing to put up under us. That was miserable. It sucked. Your shelter, and then we'll move on.
On this trip, I used the brown tarp that GH used from our original Get Home Bag Challenge. The one thing I did have on this trip that we didn't have on the first one was the introduction of the first sleeping pad. It was the Cedar Junior Trooper. Absolutely love that thing. We still have it. We still use it. I was sleeping in the emergency bivvy.
That was the adventure with the coyotes. So an hour after we laid down, heard some coyotes in the distance. Another 20-30 minutes later, I get up to use the bathroom. We see the eyes across the river. And at this point, we're sitting down, we're freezing. I'm miserable.
Still dealing with leg cramps. I'm in a lot of pain at that point.
Yeah. So we decided to dog that one off. So a lot of lessons were learned on that trip. Good, actual, proper sleep systems. Get off the ground was my biggest thing, because I even took the hammock. We set the hammock up to do something with, and then because it wasn't part of the gear, we put it up. So getting off the ground and having something actually decent to sleep in other than a Mylar sleeping bag, that was a huge lesson learned on my part.
Yeah, so with me it was still the hydration. Drink plenty of water, because it carried over from the hike into the night, and I can only imagine if we had woke up and tried to do another hike, how bad it would have been for me. Definitely took away the same deal with the sleeping system. Get something warmer. I believe in layers, putting things in between me and the ground to keep me warm. That being a sleeping pad, a blanket, a quilt, a sleeping bag, just whatever. Also, one thing we learned from that, we weren't in any immediate danger, I feel. I believe those coyotes may have actually walked right past us if we'd stayed, but the threat was there. And neither one of us had had the forethought to, hey, we need to make sure we have a way to start a fire, spook these animals off if we need to. Started looking at quick fire starters. Not your tinder, not stuff like that. I mean, something that can get a decent fire going quick. That's why I started re-carrying something we carried from high school, was the SOS fire starter flares, and have a fire in a matter of seconds in my hand to fight off, or to warn off whatever is threatening us at that time.
Okay, so the third big adventure that we went on was the Bug Out Bag Challenge, 20 miles on the Foothills Trail. As far as the hike goes, I think it was okay. It sucked a little bit while we were doing it, but no big complaints because I had the proper shoes. I think we were both in shorts. No complaints other than just sweating everywhere. Setting up my shelter, I did a hammock, and I think I had a decent sleeping bag at that point in time. So again, no complaints on my side. Lessons learned was probably just hydrate, and get better food, because I think I had a bunch of meals but nothing to snack on.
So I'm in the same boat. That trip was night and day to the failed trip. It was great. I loved every minute of it. Oh my God. Let's keep getting worse.
First part sucked. Like, sucked a lot.
Yes, the hiking sucked, especially at the beginning where we've gained, what, 1,000
Foot of
elevation in a mile. I mean, it sucked. But it was nowhere near as bad as Yellow Branch, in my opinion.
On that trip, that was the first time you used a hydration bladder as opposed
That
to
is right. Yep.
Just water bottles. You also used the Sawyer squeeze, the big squeeze. No complaints on the squeeze.
No
Very
complaints on the
fast.
squeeze, yeah.
But the hydration bladder, what'd you think about that?
The problem I was having with the hydration bladder was when you go to refill with clean water, if you were taking, like, say, a bottle and putting the squeeze on it and then squeezing it into the bag, no way for you to set that bag down to go refill your bottle without all that water coming out. It was just a big time-consuming thing. It was definitely more difficult than it needed to be. I went straight back to the water bottles and just have dealt with that, doing it that way. But I will say, the hydration bladder worked great for making sure I had enough water to keep hydrated.
Now, you also used the tent setup with a bigger sleeping pad. How was that for you compared to the other two?
So the tent setup, Worked great. I love that shelter. Still carry it today. Absolutely love it. There was a little bit of condensation on the inside when we were done, but you get that with tarps as well. So, I mean, you can't complain. I also moved up to a bigger sleeping pad. Worked great once I got it blown up. I remember having issues with it trying to blow it up because you had to use like a CPR motion on a little foam pad to pump it up. Took the cap off and just blew into that until I got it like halfway full and then did the CPR because I knew it was going to take forever. The one thing that I did learn was start looking more at my food and what I'm carrying. I carried too many snacks. I had a pound of peanut butter and I think I had brought one MRE. I might have had two, and then both of the MREs that I brought, because I had made the decision I was gonna start carrying MREs instead of pre-planning my meals, both my heat elements went out. I didn't have a cook pot, didn't have anything to cook in, didn't have a stove. Yeah, so thank God I had Brian here to help me out.
The biggest thing that I can think of between all of these trips is just get out and go freaking do them.
Yeah.
Get out and actually go test your gear. Quit talking about it. Get out and go do, we call it the Titan 10 mile challenge. But strap your bag on, because between these 3 trips, we learned so much than just sitting on our butts talking about learning. And that's the biggest thing that I can think of. You don't know about your boots, you don't know about your hydration issues, your food issues until you get out of your house and actually go do a trek with your bag. Our 20-mile hike, which was a fail with Austin, was wonderful for us. I mean, a great trip, had no problems, had no complaints really. And then you turn around 6 months later and you do it with another person and it's one of the worst trips you've ever had. If you're serious about bugging out, if you're serious about, oh, I can carry this bag, prove that you can actually do it. You can actually carry that said bag, because if you have to carry it, if you're forced to carry it, whether it be a get home situation, a real bug out situation, that's not the time to be learning.
And I'm even going to piggyback off of that and add something here. I see a lot of comments on our videos about my size. The people out there that are congratulating me and telling me, good job for, I like seeing a plus size guy doing this. I like to see these things. Let me encourage you other plus size guys. Get out there and just do it. Don't use the excuse of, I can't do it because of my size. You just have to get out and go. You may not be able to hit the 10 miles today. You might only make it a mile. But hey, you made it a mile. That's a mile closer than what you would have done if emergency had hit. So get out there and try out your gear, try out your equipment, and make sure it works for you. You don't have to be the fittest person in the world to do these things. Just get out there and do it.
You don't have to be the youngest neither. There's a lot of guys out here that are 50, 60, 70 years old that are doing more than the 20-somethings. And what's the excuse? I mean, I had a split femur and I was still hiking. Not the best idea, not the best decision.
Do not recommend.
Don't recommend that. I didn't let that hold me back. And had David said, hey, listen, dude, I don't think it's safe, we would have remapped. We would have said, hey, instead of the Foothills Trail climbing mountains, 2,000 foot of elevation, let's go do Brasstown again, or let's go do Yellow Branch again. Something a little bit easier, but still with the knowledge, still with the educational portion of going out here and doing things.
Another thing we probably need to address too is the fact that we don't start fires.
Mm-hmm.
The reasoning behind that is where we live, there's always a fire ban. And 2, we're using these situations as prepping for if an end of the world situation was to happen. We don't want to be giving smoke signals to everybody, telling them, hey, look, these guys are over here cooking hamburgers, come get it.
David's right. A fire will give off your location. It'll give smoke signals. You still have to go out and get the wood. After a 10-day mile hiking trip, you don't want to go search the woods for 2 hours to go find some firewood. So being able to say, okay, I'm cold, in 5 minutes I can pull out my bag or pull out my tent and be warm can save your life. So carry your shelter, stop building fires. All right, guys, so again, we appreciate you guys for joining us for this video, little discussion, get home bag, bug out bag events that we've done. We are trying to plan a trip with Austin, with David, get both of them together. So that's something that we're working on. Scheduling is pretty hard with the 3 of us. So that's why it's taking you a year to get back on a video.
Yeah.
That's all we've got for today's video. Again, if you want to see the videos that we've talked about, they will be in the up here or in the comment section down below. So make sure you go and check all 3 of those out. Again, it was the Get Home Bag Challenge Part 1, which was Brasstown, Get Home Bag Fail, which was our Yellow Branch, and then our Bug Out 20 miles on the Foothills Trail. So again, if you want to check those out, they'll be in the comment section or they'll be in the description. Make sure you check them out. That's all we got.
That's it.
You do out.
Later, guys.